is what a lot of you have been asking me. I know, it's been an age.
For 3 years.
Or, right, like 3 years since the last time I uploaded. Funny story, kinda long, but to make it short and sweet, since this video is neither, and also long enough, I kinda moved to Australia. Something like 12,000 miles away.
That's like a little over 19,000 kilometers, dude.
Yep. So, yeah, things have been a little hectic ever since, and I apologize for such a long gap between videos and socializing.
You should be.
But I'm hoping that this video marks the beginning of a much more consistent upload schedule. I don't know. I can't really promise anything, but honestly, I miss this shit.
And you guys.
And I know this won't even come close to making up for all the lost time, but I decided if I ever got back into the swing of things, it wouldn't be a single story video, but rather 4.
I get it.
And also keep them confined to a certain horror subject that 1, most of you tend to enjoy, and 2, has only ever offered worst case scenarios that I know of. See? Just look at that content warning. So, do whatever you need to do. Kick back, take your shoes off, and pitch them at the light switch like you're Kurt Schilling in 2004, because these are 4 disturbing dark web horror stories. I'm the type of person who always loves a good mystery. At least, I used to be, when the mysteries didn't involve me personally. I don't know where this story begins, or where it leads, but I'll do my best to remember the sequence of events that led up to me writing this. The trend is tired now, I know, but back when they weren't, mystery boxes were a fascinating concept. The idea of purchasing something online without knowing what it was piqued my interest quite a bit. I never thought that I'd actually buy one. I just enjoyed watching other people react to random creepy objects. It was kind of like the adult version of putting a quarter into one of those gumball machines that gave out toys instead. Some were enclosed in those bright plastic cases that everyone seemed the most interested in. It's the next level up from that, and I know myself too well at this point to deny wanting that kind of feeling again. The more mystery boxes became a buzzword over the internet, the more I found myself getting lured by the concept. Curiosity eventually got the better of me, and one day I decided to give in and buy one. Since everybody knew about them, I figured if I received anything incriminating or heinous, calling the police wouldn't immediately make me suspect number 1. Even still, I took precautions and screen capped anything resembling receipts, just in case. I wasn't planning on wasting half my savings like some of these YouTubers were. Something within my own budget was more than enough to check this whole thing off my bucket list. I honestly couldn't tell you how much I'd put down, but $300 was my limit. When I found a box in the right budget, I bought it. Just the process of purchasing a mystery box was a thrill on its own. All I could do after that was wait and cross my fingers it wasn't a scam. Awaiting its arrival brought back that old feeling of being a little kid at one of those machines, and it was amazing. The day something arrived in the mail was even better. Having it in front of me gave me a feeling I can't really describe. It was a mixture of excitement, anxiety, fear, and catharsis. It was already checked off my bucket list now, so I put on some gloves and opened it carefully. The box promised to contain an item that would, quote, offer a lifetime of questions without answers. I didn't know what it meant at the time, and chalked it up as something cryptic to write on an already unknown item. In hindsight, I wish I never gave in to the trend. The box contained a single key, along with a note that read the following: "This key will not bring you to anywhere you haven't been before. What it unlocks will be familiar to you. You've come face to face with it countless times before. But be warned, friend. Your affinity for the unknown will cost you something intangible. You wanted a mystery, and a mystery you've been given. Using this key will no longer bring you the same comforts. Instead, it will only take away your peace of mind. Good luck on your quest. I hope the price you paid was worth it." Cryptic as hell, and kind of a letdown. I fully expected a box of random items, both creepy and intriguing. Not this, whatever this was. I didn't feel like going on a scavenger hunt just to see if this key led to anything valuable. It wasn't old, or even old-fashioned. It looked like a modern key that would unlock a door. The question now was whether I was willing to waste even more time finding that door. For all I knew, it was the key to someone's empty storage unit. Either way, I was done with it all and just put the key right back in the box. As for the note, I kept reading as if it was a clue to a dead drop somewhere in the wilderness. Geocaching was also a craze around this time, but that wasn't the thrill I was seeking in this. The note didn't appear to give clues to a location. It just said it would lead me to a place I'd already been. No longer feeling excited, I left it alone for a while. You get what you get with these kinds of things, and I knew that from the very beginning. But after a while of distractions and sleep, I kept thinking about what that note said and couldn't shake it. The key would not lead me to anywhere I haven't been before. It would bring me to something familiar until I use it again. Things like that started to bother me a lot. It almost seemed fine-tuned for me to read, personally, and I wasn't sure I was comfortable with that. I figured I'd get my money's worth and at least try to figure out what it meant and where to go. It was almost a riddle, but it was written like a warning, like the use of this key would only lead me to dread. Looking back, I could have kicked myself for not understanding it sooner. The key was indeed a modern mold, and I'd used it before, countless times. I hoped I was wrong about what I was thinking, but just to be sure, I put my house key beside it. I'm a fucking idiot for not realizing this sooner. If I hadn't spent so long on the note, then maybe I would have. The keys were identical, at least on the table. I didn't want to, but checking to see if it fit in my door was the only way to be positive. And it did. This random person, somehow, some way, cloned the key to my house and sold it back to me for a price I didn't know I had. It's been years since this happened, and to answer a question I know most of you will ask, yes, I still live in that same house today. Of course, all the locks have been changed several times, and a few new security measures have been taken as well. I'm honestly not sure which is worse. Knowing that someone out there had full access to my house and didn't do anything with it, or not knowing if they ever plan to in the future. If I could go back in time, I never would have let myself give in to the trend. It wasn't worth it. Being home no longer gives me the sense of security it used to. No matter how many locks I change, I'll always have doubts it had made any difference. I sought out a mystery in a wave of excitement, and got one that cost me the assurance of safety. That note said it'd offer a lifetime of questions, and it was right about that. This is the story of how my best friend slipped into the dark web and never came back up. It was just another ordinary day for me, with nothing of real substance in my schedule. I had just come home from work and was in the process of settling in when my phone rang. It was my best friend, who we'll refer to as Sam for this story. He was frantic, almost incoherent, repeating nonsense I could barely keep up with, aside from dark web and purchased. Throughout his nonsensical rambling, I tried to put two and two together, assuming he'd bought something there that he probably shouldn't have. As far as the dark web goes, I'm a novice. I know about as much as I've been told, and that's really it. I've never ventured there myself, but I know a few people who have. Sam was one of those people. He'd always been the adventurous type, eager and willing to go explore the unknown. From what I could actually piece together from our call, he told me he had stumbled upon a site on the dark web promising to reveal the truth about unsolved mysteries. Sam had always been fascinated by true crime, so for him to be lured in by a title like that, it didn't really surprise me.
Apparently, something had gone wrong while he was there. He said the site locked out halfway through an article out of nowhere. Everything was frozen, including hotkeys and prompts. Sam tried to reboot his computer, but found out his hard drive was wiped after logging back in. All his files, his photos, his personal information, gone. I didn't know what else to tell him except that it was probably a good idea to cancel his cards and maybe get a new ID. I didn't really know how much trouble he'd gotten into, or what might have happened before his hard drive got wiped. I just thought, and kinda hoped, that all the horror stories I'd heard about the dark web were over-exaggerated. We ended the call at some point with him assuring me that he'd get all new cards and IDs just to be safe. I chalked the rest of his tone up to being anxious, or maybe even frustrated he had to do any of this to begin with. I felt for him, but honestly, I couldn't really do much except give suggestions that made the most sense to me. I couldn't have known at the time, but that was the last conversation I'd ever have with him. The following day, when I texted and got no response, I assumed he was just busy doing what we had talked about earlier. Not hearing from him after 3 days was when I knew something was terribly wrong. All his social media accounts went completely silent, and he stopped answering his phone entirely. I was worried sick, and even reached out to his family, but they didn't seem to know what was going on with him either. I tried to convince myself that he had gone on some kind of urbex adventure, just to get away from the stress for a while. But deep down, I knew lying to myself was not going to help this situation at all. It wasn't like him to just disappear without a trace, and it certainly wasn't like him not to tell anyone if he did. Days turned into weeks, and all I could think about was Sam. I wondered if he was okay, or whether he was even still alive. I became obsessed with finding out what had happened to him, even after police had given up their extensive searches. I spent days scouring the dark web, trying to find something, anything that could point me in the right direction. I didn't even know where to start or what I was even doing. All I really knew was that I was desperate. Maybe the place to look for answers was the same place this whole nightmare situation began. I couldn't tell you how I managed to find it, but after a while of searching through countless dead ends and false hopes, I stumbled onto what looked like a forum called Shadow Market. As I browsed through the pages, I saw that it was actually a marketplace for illegal goods and services. Seeing this didn't really surprise me. We've all heard the stories. I fully expected the dark web to make me trek through this type of stuff sooner or later. But something was different about what I'd just found. It almost seemed personal, like it existed just to mock me. Every corner of the page screamed cult, with affirmations that everything on the market was being sold for sacrificial purposes. It was genuinely fucked up. Scrolling through, I had to constantly remind myself that what I was seeing wasn't on the surface web. The auctions were bold, some described in such graphic detail, it was a struggle just to keep myself from throwing up in the trash. I can't remember how long I'd been scrolling before I came across an ad entitled The Lost Souls Auction. The title itself was no more disturbing than any other. It was the subtext description that caught my attention. The auction was catered exclusively toward the souls of missing persons. From what I remember, the starting bid was somewhere around $10,000, and they only continued escalating the longer I stared at the page. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. People can't really be this fucked up, can they? Every ad was titled with the name of the missing person, a brief description, and the date they'd gone missing. Thinking back to the last conversation I had with Sam, I pulled out my phone to check the date. April 4th. I don't know why, but in that moment, it seemed like I had reached an epiphany, as if having that information would make the search for him easier. It didn't. The number of missing people in this country is a horror story all on its own. I must have spent hours looking at ads that seemed promising, completely unaware that the sun had already risen. I couldn't even remember the last time I'd eaten or changed out of my clothes, and I didn't care. That's when I found it. An auction ad listed for Sam with missing date stating April 5th, just one day after I'd spoken to him last. Clicking on the link immediately displayed a photo of him, a very recent photo that looked like it had been taken just a few days ago. I was horrified and sick to my stomach. It was already bad enough knowing that my best friend had been abducted. But seeing his fucking soul being auctioned off? I couldn't just sit there and watch this. I had to go do something. I went to the authorities with my laptop and showed them all the information I'd gathered in the last few days. They were skeptical at first, which I guess I can't really blame them for. But after seeing the website and links for themselves, they realized pretty quickly just how serious this was. The police had to call in some help from cybercrimes, but were eventually able to track down the location of the server hosting the auction site. It was located in a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of town, which, to their own horror, had already been searched in their initial investigation. During their second raid of the area, they came up empty-handed again, with only a few indications that someone had been there. The only items confirming that they'd found the right place were a few tossed computers and a note that'll haunt me for the rest of my life. The item you're looking for is currently out of stock. We apologize for any inconvenience this may have caused. It's sickening to think how dehumanizing a person can be. This wasn't an item. This was my best friend since childhood. I never saw Sam again. I couldn't even find the ad posted for him after the raid. To this day, his status and whereabouts are nothing but rumors and speculation. For a long time afterward, I hoped that maybe another lead or even a taunt would resurface about where he might be, and whether or not he's even okay. But everything seemed to just screech to a halt after finding that fucking note on the ground. No emails, no phone calls, no cryptic texts, nothing. Being left in the dark can change you as a person forever. I had already known to avoid the dark web, but this happened to someone I cared about deeply. Knowing not to tread in those places is one thing. Feeling the effects of what it can do is another. I don't know where Sam is or if he's okay, and it breaks my heart to think he'll only exist in my head from now on.
This story didn't really happen to me. It happened to a friend of mine whose name will be changed for the sake of her privacy. I'll refer to her as Jane. To understand Jane as a person, you have to be aware of a particular hobby she has. She's always been a collector of oddities, handmade dolls, vintage keepsakes, anything that the average person either didn't have or didn't know was a thing. Right about the time mystery boxes were trending just because of how weird and creepy they were, Jane was the only one in our group of friends who was visibly interested in the topic. She always got excited whenever they were brought up. But that's about as far as we thought it would go. None of us ever believed for a second she'd ever go through the trouble of buying one herself. If there's a moral to this story, it's that no matter how much you think you know someone, they'll always find a way to surprise you. And that she did. Unbeknownst to the rest of us, Jane had spent hours watching those stupid unboxing videos and learned enough from each one of them how to access the dark web. Now, I know you can buy a mystery box on eBay or Marketplace, but again, Jane liked the hard-to-get items. She figured a mystery box from the dark web would be the best place to find something very few others had. Maybe even one of a kind if she was lucky. With that in mind, it didn't really surprise any of us when she announced one day that she'd finally bought one. This idea of hers was in no way to gain any popularity on YouTube. In fact, she wasn't even interested in filming it at all. If anything, it just validated her passion as a collector. Part of me was excited for her too, but another, louder part of me was more concerned about its contents, or even lack thereof. In two worst-case scenarios, she either got scammed and received nothing, or the final scenes of the movie Seven played out in real life. It took about a month for the box to finally arrive. I honestly would have forgotten all about it if she hadn't been so vocal about how long it was taking. Either way, it was there, and whatever she spent half her rent's paycheck on was her issue to deal with. At least, that's what I thought. She insisted on someone being there with her when she opened it, which I chalked up to either being nervous or needing a witness for something incriminating. I won't try and deny being curious about this whole thing myself. Our friends group seemed to click just because of how different all of us were, but my interests were the closest in similarity to Jane's. Horror movies, scary stories, a borderline unhealthy appreciation for Halloween, that was me. Apparently, I was the next best person to be there for her. Everyone else was either unavailable or uninterested, so I texted her on my way and left. When I got to her house, she practically dragged me right through the door from excitement. Again, it had been a month since she bought it. The box itself was pretty unassuming at first. A fairly standard size wrapped in a brown grocery paper with tape on every fold. Not having any idea what she was about to rummage through, she put on gloves and a mask that she'd already laid out beforehand. Inside was a single item, carefully wrapped up in multiple layers of thick padding. It was an old porcelain doll that almost looked as if someone had made it themselves. Its features were standard enough, but a few of them looked like they'd been arranged or something, as if they'd been broken at one point and replaced in the best way someone knew how. Personally, I found the thing a little weird and kind of shoddy, but Jane thought all its imperfections were endearing. The only thing she seemed to take issue with was how much the doll weighed. She said it felt heavier than it should be. I wouldn't know. Apparently, it had been filled with small granules, like sand. We didn't understand why, and I certainly wasn't interested in porcelain dolls enough to try and figure it out. As far as I was concerned, whatever this was didn't concern me. It was Jane's problem now. I was more relieved she got the experience out of her system. At first, she was thrilled to have it displayed among her collection of weirdness. I have no idea why she or anyone else found porcelain dolls appealing in any way. I'm all for spooky and weird, but they creeped me out enough to avoid spending too much time in certain areas of her room. She had more than a couple, and spent hours examining each one of them, trying to imagine their backstories and histories, even making a few of them up depending on where she'd bought it from. But in typical cliché B-movie fashion, it only took a few days before she mentioned how something felt off, but not in the way you'd normally expect. When she mentioned how weird things were becoming around her place, I joked that she'd managed to buy a haunted doll or something, but the things she experienced weren't paranormal. She never misplaced her keys only to find them someplace they'd never normally be. She never heard footsteps or saw the lights flicker. Instead, she said someone kept calling on a private number. Now, Jane never answers a call if the number is private or unlisted. She just doesn't. I can only recall it happening maybe 2 or 3 times in the years that I've known her, but ever since that doll arrived, the calls came in droves and weren't letting up. Every few minutes, then an hour of silence, another private call at 1 a.m., silence, then 6 more around 4 in the morning. It was bizarre. I honestly felt bad she never seemed to get a moment's rest. The only thing I could suggest was maybe answering one of the calls, just to see. Maybe it was someone with the wrong number or something. She flat out refused, saying she'd rather go through the process of changing her number entirely. For anyone wondering why she's so adamant about this, join the club. She's never gone into detail about why private calls freak her out so much, and up until now, she's never had a reason to. But instead of grilling her on the subject, I offered to be the one to answer instead. As much as I felt for her, it was starting to irritate me as well. Whenever we spoke on the phone, our dialogue would break with each incoming call, and it was incessant. I was getting pretty tired of all the constant interruptions, so being the one to potentially stop it was perfectly fine by me. I expected her to immediately shoot down my offer, but to my surprise, she didn't. It had been nearly 5 days since receiving that doll, and the phone calls showed no signs of stopping anytime soon. With a bit of hesitation, she agreed to let me answer, but only on the condition I didn't give out any personal information. No names, no addresses, no nothing. Consider it done. The sooner all this shit stopped, the sooner the rest of us could just get on with our lives. I knew it was bad, but I didn't know how bad until I saw her face when she came over. She looked exhausted. Even when she shut her phone off, just knowing that someone was still calling kept her up, and it absolutely showed. She wasn't in my house 2 minutes before her phone rang again. As expected, the number was private, so I answered. Before I could even finish saying hello, the line erupted with hysterical pleas to give her back. I had to hold the phone away from my ear from just how loud and out of breath the other person was screeching. Eventually, I managed to get in a word and ask, "Who the hell is this?" The phrase, "give her back," didn't seem like it was meant for us anyway. Whoever was talking definitely sounded like a woman, maybe middle-aged, but I couldn't be sure. She kept repeating the "give her back" line over and over, and trying to explain just seemed to fall on deaf ears. I hung up the phone, and once again, the person called back. This time, when I answered, there was no hello. Instead, I immediately told the other person to just let me speak. They were out of breath, mumbling something that didn't sound like it was directed at me. So I told them, "Look, I don't know why you keep blowing up this phone, but I think you might have the wrong number. Who exactly are you trying to call?" When she said Jane's name, I almost thought that I'd misheard. "You're looking for Jane? For what possible reason? You haven't left any voicemails or messages. You just keep calling non-fucking-stop." And then she hung up, just like that. When I tell you that Jane never got another call from that person again, I'm not even kidding. I don't know what I said or how I said it that made the call stop, but they did. It was like a switch had turned off in this crazy person's head to just drop it entirely. And the longer her phone stayed quiet, the more we thought it was actually over. Unfortunately for Jane, this peace of mind wouldn't last very long. A few days of silence and well-deserved sleep did her well, but after about a week, things started escalating. Rather than digital harassment, Jane was now seeing signs of someone trying to break in. One night after Jane was coming home from work, she said it looked as if someone aggressively tried to pick the lock on her door. The metal was all scratched to hell, and so was the doorknob. The police were involved several times to do sweeps, but nothing ever really came of it. Ever. I don't know how it was possible, but all of this only ever started happening after she ordered that doll. Either it had something to do with everything going on, or all of this was just an astronomical coincidence. For the next week or so, the strange occurrences continued. More of the same physical signs of someone trying to get in. She even found a note in her mailbox one day that said, "What you have is mine." Okay. Note in hand, maybe police could at least get a print off the paper. And that was the plan Jane prepared for after work. We knew it was a long shot, but still, it was better to try than do nothing. Jane explained it all came crashing down that same night. Despite having security cameras en route, they'd never served their purpose for this. Later that evening, someone knocked on her door. A loud, rhythmic knock, she said, that went on for as long as she froze out of fear. The knocks became louder, more aggressive. Then it was pounding. Jane doesn't remember calling the police, but she did. And by now, they were pretty caught up with her entire situation. It didn't take long before she saw the flashing lights, and yet whoever was at the door didn't seem to notice or even care. Jane stood frozen until she could hear the woman being subdued by police, screaming in what sounded like gibberish through the door. Only then did she feel safe enough to open it for police. And as soon as she did, the woman snapped back to look at her. All she kept screaming was, "Give me my daughter. You have my daughter." What? Her daughter? How many levels of crazy could one person be? Police looked confused, assuming it had to be a mistake. But Jane knew it had to be a reference to the doll. Without even hesitating, she ran back to get it. Oddity or otherwise, if this was what started all this, she was glad to part ways with it. Remember when Jane said that doll seemed too heavy? Apparently, the cremated ashes of that woman's daughter had been stolen, hidden away in a porcelain doll, and sold as a form of paid debt. I couldn't tell you what kind of life you have to live in order for something like that to happen, but somehow this woman had made it her mission to retrieve them however she could. I don't know the details of what transpired after the exchange, whether or not the police let that woman keep it, or if she's in jail somewhere, far away from Jane. What I do know is ever since this happened, Jane never mentioned another mystery box again. Her interest in what the dark web offered dwindled almost entirely, at least low enough to stay as far away as possible. She's a lot more cautious and skeptical than she used to be, and if you want my opinion, that's probably a good thing. I never understood the allure at the time, or what good paying money for a mystery box could do, but after Jane's experience and seeing everything it did to her, I know I'll never want to. The dark web is no place for an amateur.
Like most people, I was curious about the dark web, but I was also hesitant to explore it myself. I had heard all the stories about how it was full of illegal activity, hackers, and other unsavory characters. But one day, for whatever reason, I decided to take the plunge and see what all the fuss was about. Why the hell not? I had some free time to kill and didn't have any plans for a good while. Subletting my apartment was the only real thing I had going on, and it was a welcome distraction from all of the paperwork. I figured, while I was waiting to find a new place a little closer to work, I might as well delve while I could. I downloaded Tor, tweaked a few settings, and started exploring just to see what I could find. At first, it was exciting. There were all kinds of sites I'd never seen before, and it felt like I'd burrowed into a secret corner of the internet most people didn't know existed. I mean, I was aware most people had heard of it at least, but everything just looked so primitive, like the internet did in the early 90s or something. Bare bones coding, minimal graphics, limited colors. I almost felt like I had stepped back in time. But the more I explored, the more I realized just how far from that reality I was, and just how twisted and dangerous the dark web could actually be. I saw the usual sites that people often refer to whenever the dark web is brought up. Sites that sold drugs, guns, and even people. At one point, I even managed to stumble upon a forum where hackers shared tips and tricks for stealing personal information in order to access bank accounts. I hate to say it, but after a few days of mindlessly clicking through links and seeing the same content again and again, I felt kind of bored. I never expected the dark web of all places to make me feel like that. But you can only see the words cocaine, heroin, and firearms so many times before it starts to feel like a huge waste of time. At least if you're not already looking for that kind of stuff. I was about to call it quits before I found a site that didn't look like the rest. It was simply called The Game, and it claimed to be an online survival game where players complete increasingly difficult challenges in order to win. The thing is, it was never made clear exactly what the winner won, which I found a bit weird. I assumed it was money, but why not disclose an amount? At first, I was intrigued. The site had a sleeker design, which was a nice change of pace from strings of links and endless console text, and the challenges seemed like they would be fun to complete. In the middle of the page was a button labeled TOS. It was the only clickable area that I could see. Normally, I'd have done what the rest of us would do and just skip right past the text, but given where I was, it was probably smarter to actually read them. As I did, I saw just how unconventional they were, and before long, I was neither curious nor excited to explore any further than I had. For starters, the site required players to sign up with their actual name and address. Like I'd really take that risk. At first I thought putting in fake information would be simple enough to secure my identity. But this wasn't some random forum on the surface web. Something told me the information would be verified somehow, especially after reading the terms of service. I remember reading at one point that refusal to take part in challenges or attempting to cheat would result in ID infiltration, or something like that. The challenges also required proof of completion, and would involve breaking the law in various ways. None of this sounded like any fun at all, and seemed more like a trap than an online survival game. It involved real-world scenarios with zero incentive to actually play it. For all I knew, the winner didn't get anything except a rap sheet and jail time. I tried to close out of the page, but the site wouldn't let me. Clicking the X immediately made a pop-up appear informing me that my information had already been collected. It stated I was now contractually obligated to compete. What the fuck? Contract? What contract? I hadn't even typed anything in since I got to the site. This was about the time I started to get scared. I hadn't voluntarily given the site any personal information, yet somehow my PC had been remote accessed by someone. I tried to disconnect from the internet entirely, but it was no use. The pop-up window wouldn't go away, and I didn't seem to have any control over my PC. Not even physically unplugging everything worked. Whenever I turned it back on, the same thing would always happen. I'd even kept everything off and unplugged for a good 6 hours before trying again. No matter what I did, or how long I did it for, the outcome was always the same. The day had been a waste, and I'd accomplished absolutely nothing. I couldn't even check on my subletting status. So in a moment of absolute stupidity, I figured, if this was the only thing left to do, then so be it. That moment was more or less filled with frustration. I thought that maybe, at some point during the game, I could regain control and just fuck off. And so it began. Challenges started out easy enough. Stealing something small from a gas station, for example. But they quickly escalated without indication. At one point, I was asked to break into a neighbor's apartment, proving I had stolen a valuable item. Another challenge asked me to vandalize a local business. I didn't want to do any of that, but I felt like I had no choice at the time. The site had my personal information, and I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't complete the challenges. Sure enough, one day, I was asked to commit a truly heinous act. Something I tried to convince myself was a joke. I was asked to murder someone close to me and provide proof with a photo and a checklist of their personal information. But it wasn't just that. There were specific rules to abide by with this one. The photo of the victim had to include their face and be recognizable. It couldn't be doctored in any way whatsoever, not even to adjust the brightness or clarity. As for providing their personal information, I had a feeling that was meant for whoever was running this thing. Maybe it was just easier to verify whether or not the person was actually in my social circle. At the very least, it would be enough of an indication that I knew this person well enough to provide things like their phone number, address, date of birth, workplace, job title, and marital status. Committing theft was one thing, but murder? Absolutely not. I was done. I figured if I was going to be fucked either way, I might as well take my chances with whatever this was. I tried to disconnect from the site and trash my PC, but it was far too late for it to make any difference. The site had collected more than enough information. I didn't have any idea who was running this site, what they wanted, or what they were capable of. They were clearly twisted enough to post challenges expecting participants to actually go through with everything. So I didn't really know what to do after that, aside from canceling my cards and IDs, but that didn't make me feel any better. Staying at my current address wouldn't make any difference if whoever had my info actually planned to pay me a visit. I started obsessing about all the various ways this could end, and how to somehow move house without going bankrupt in the process. I started picking up more hours at work, just to avoid being home any longer than I had to be. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary when I was, but still, it felt more like a prison than my home. A few weeks went by with the same old routine. Work till I drop, sleep it off, rinse, repeat. Weekends were a nightmare, nowhere to go, and no one to meet. When Monday morning came, I was probably the happiest person on earth just to work. That's when a break in this situation came. I still felt uneasy about being home, even though nothing had happened in weeks. I hadn't even gotten an email or a single text message from these psychos. But lo and behold, my prayers for a sublet had finally been answered. And weirdly enough, it was someone who worked in the same office. We'll call him Dan for the rest of the story. He came to my desk one morning asking if I'd had any luck, and whether I'd, quote, gotten his application. Well, since I didn't have access to anyone's forms, I had no idea Dan was remotely interested in my place. Or why. I told him I'd been having computer issues lately and wasn't able to access anyone's at all. My work PC was in no way connected, so I asked him to send me a copy in a work email. Trust me when I say, this guy's application was not special, but to have one at all seemed like the key to get out of this mess. I didn't even hesitate. One quick read-through and I told him the apartment was his. The guy had the same expression that children have on Christmas. There was still the small issue of where I'd be living, but the gears had been turning long enough to give me confidence. Dan's current address wasn't exactly ideal for the work commute, but it was still a lot closer to work than the one I was currently living in. I couldn't be picky about shit like this anyway. I would have moved right then and there if I could. Anything to get as far away from my place as possible. This was now priority number one. Treating it as such paid off big time, and before I knew it, my stuff was in boxes. I tried not to show my excitement to anyone, especially him. Under the radar, almost free. When I finally moved all my stuff to his shell of a hellhole, I practically hugged the linoleum. The average person would have probably seen the place for what it was, the aftermath of college roommates, or the single mid-30s guy that Dan actually was. To me, it was somewhere I could pick myself up again, start things over and revel in opportunities to feel bored. I never missed feeling bored more in my entire life. After switching apartments and settling in, I found time to think back on the choices I'd made. Had I overreacted for some of them? Probably. But that's not the point. I had done it all to myself. Even now, no longer living where I used to, I could easily let my mind wander off and make this place feel just as suffocating as the old one. The game didn't do anything but keep me paranoid and unhinged. It was a mindfuck that isn't just exclusive to the dark web. Plenty of areas on the surface are capable. Still, looking back, I don't think I'd have done anything differently, other than keeping my curiosity in check. It's been about 9 or 10 months since I've moved, and as far as I know, there's nothing new to report. I'm hoping it stays that way until Dan comes back from sick leave, or wherever he's been the last couple weeks. I honestly can't believe there was ever a time in my life where I willingly worked this many extra shifts for someone.